Hey, what happened to you on your next near-death experience or death experience?
Well, that was February 17th, 2008. Well, let me back it up just a few months. In October of 2007, I had been really ill, not able to hold any food down. I was losing weight, just lethargic feeling. And I'm one of those people who has to stay busy all the time. I normally go with about 3-4 hours sleep a night, if that. Being a writer, I'm up all hours of the night. So when I started feeling this way, my family was all noticing the darkening in my eyes and what have you. Some people thought I was on drugs. Of course, that would have been a more favorable thing than what I did. So I'm not a person who likes to run to the doctor, but my father and my mother both convinced me, look, you need to go. So I went. My dad went with me. Sorry, I'm making a cup of coffee.
That's fine.
Java, as you refer to it. So I went to the hospital, and I'm thinking they're going to tell me he's got the flu or, some little bug, The doctor comes in and says, we'd like for you to see an oncologist. I said, oncologist? That's for cancer. Why would I need to go see an oncologist? Because, Mr. Wells, you have cancer. I mean, I remember looking over at my dad. My dad had this look on his face, like disbelief and shock, and I don't know. It was a weird look on his face. And I'm just laying there thinking, no, this can't be real. They've got a bad report. And I said, look, maybe you got my report mixed up with somebody else's. I came in here with the flu. He goes, no, you have cancer. And we'd like for you to see an oncologist soon. So they gave me an oncologist number. So I called the oncologist. The oncologist said, okay, we have an opening for like in 2 weeks. I said, okay, that's fine. But, the hospital thinks that it's pretty major for me to see you as soon as possible. So they conferred with the hospital, and then I was in within like 2 days to see the oncologist. So oncologist does his test and comes back with, you have cancer. You have cancer in your lungs and you have cancer in your liver. And we want you to go to Moffitt Cancer Center. Whoa, wait a minute. Well, everybody I've ever known went to Moffitt is because they're dying. And they went, yes, you maybe have 3 months left to live.
Oh, my God.
Right. That was in November 2007.
You could feel your heart probably drop right down to your stomach when he said that to you.
Yeah, considering the fact I was 38 years old, and I just, it was a weird feeling. How am I going to tell my son? How am I going to tell my mom? Because, my mother and I, we were real close. And how am I just, what am I going to do? Type feeling. So I said, well, look, do you mind if I get a second opinion on this? They said, no, you're more than entitled to. But, we want you still to go ahead. We've written out the paperwork for you because you can't get into Moffitt unless you've been seen by an oncologist who confirms the fact that you have terminally ill cancer. So I went ahead and registered with Moffitt and went and seen another oncologist. And that oncologist, my mother was with me, and the oncologist did the testing and came back to, yes, I confirmed you have stage 3 lung and stage 4 liver. Okay, trying to digest this. And like a week later, we were at Moffitt. My mom drove me. At this point, I was very weak, and I was getting weaker, it seemed like, by the day, and losing weight drastically. And going to the office, to see the oncologist there at Moffitt, and Dr. Guerra was her name, and very, very, really good doctor. I can't say nothing but praise for Moffitt. And so I go in, I'm sitting there, the receptionist has already gotten all my information, she's talking to my mom, and I kept saying, I'm cold. And it was wintertime for Florida, which means we have below 70. So it's nothing like the weather over there in Washington. I said I was cold, very cold. And so they got me a heated blanket. Put the heated blanket on. I'm still cold, and I'm shivering really bad. So they get me a thermal blanket and put it underneath, and then put the warm blanket over top. I'm still cold. And before I could say the words cold again for the third time, I passed out. I was gone. I mean, I just went, doop. And the next thing I remember, they're reviving me back in the back. And in the hospital side of the, I guess, the ER section of it, and they're trying to get me to say my name, and everything's just really spinning. And I can't really function. I can't really focus on anything. And then it seems like a blur, because the next thing I know, I'm in a room, and there's IVs hooked up to me, and my mom's sitting over to my right. And then it was like a flash, and in my memories part of things, and it was nighttime. And I felt like I had a really bad headache, and I was begging for something to make my headache go away. And before I could say much more, I crashed. And my mom sees a whole team of guys running, respiratory therapists and this and that, rushing into my room. I flatlined. They go in and they put the pneumothorax, and in case some of the listeners aren't aware of what that is, it's a 14-inch rod that goes right in from your side directly into your lung. And there's no deadener for that, because they need you to be awake for it as much as you can. So usually, as I did, you pass out from the pain, because it feels like somebody just stuck you in the side with a bayonet. So they did this, and they've got me hooked up to that, and along with a bunch of other wires, and also a face mask. And my mom came in the room. I remember that for a moment, and she's talking to me. And then, meantime, the oncologist and the hospital staff is talking to her outside and telling her that she needs to make the preparations for me, that I'm not going to make it to the night. And that I had already crashed once, but it wasn't a long time. It was just a short crash, and they were able to revive me. But that I would not make it to the night. So call all your family members that you need to call. He's not going to make morning time. So that must have been the hardest thing for a parent to hear. Being a parent myself, I know that would be the most grueling thing for me.
It would.
So, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said it very much would be.
Yeah. And so the doctor's going over with her the reports on the scans and everything they had done, and told her that the cancer had spread drastically, and that there was no chance of survival. And she says, "No, you don't know my son. My son will pull through this. He's a survivor, and he will." And of course, doctor, hearing that, I imagine, would think that's just an over-anxious parent to see their child live. So he kind of nodded, I guess, at her, and kind of did the whole pat her on the shoulder thing, like, sure, you know. And my mom was very much determined I was going to live. And she kept telling him, "No, you just don't know him. He will pull through this." And they said, "Ms. Wells, you need to get prepared. Your son is terminal. He's not going to survive." And in the room, meanwhile, I'm in there having a chat with this gentleman who had walked into my room wearing a baseball cap, an African-American male in his 40s. And he says, "How you doing? My name's Charlie." And I said, "Hi, Charlie." I spoke to him. And he says, "Yeah, would you mind telling my wife I'm okay, I'm good, and I want her to be happy too." I said, "Okay." And he says, "I got to be going now." And he turned around and he walked straight out the window. The glass window.
Wow.
He walks right through it and out. So when my mom came in the room, I told her. I was able to talk just briefly. I mean, like very low, but I was able to tell Charlie's wife he's okay. She goes, "Who's Charlie?" And I said, "The man with the baseball cap on." She goes, what man? I said, he was just here. He just went out the window. So my mom's thinking I'm kind of on the delusional side.
Yeah, hallucinating
So she
at
goes,
that point.
she's thinking I'm just hallucinating, right? So she goes back out to the waiting area for the people who are waiting for their loved ones to pass. And there's this African-American lady in her late 40s, early 50s, sitting there. And she's sobbing. And my mom makes conversation with her. And she says, yeah, my husband, he's in the other room over there, and he's not expected to make it, talking about her husband. And my mom says, oh, well, that's what they say about my son, but we're going to hold faith that everything's going to be all right. And just as my mom said this, they came and got the woman and told her that her husband had just passed.
Oh, wow.
And she came back, and she was sitting there, and my mom was trying to console her. My mom's that way. She, even in her deepest despair, she was trying to console someone else. And she's trying to console her, and she says, I don't know what I'm going to do without Charlie. And my mom says, Charlie? And she says, yes, Charlie was my husband. She goes, did he wear a red baseball cap? She goes, and she smiled. She says, oh, as a matter of fact, he did. That was his favorite thing. And she says, he just came to my son and told him that to tell you he was okay and he had to go, but he wanted you to be happy. And then he walked out the window. The hairs on the other woman's arm stood up, and she got very religious, and she was very excited. She felt that was a confirmation, because I had no way of knowing who Charlie was. I had no way of knowing that he wore a baseball cap. Nothing of the detail, and it all confirmed itself. So once again, I saw something that I wasn't supposed to see from the other side.
That is very interesting. And so then tell us what happened after that. Okay, you're in the hospital. What happened?
I died again. It was like I was playing a yo-yo effect. And it was moments again. And then those sporadic moments, like for like 2 or 3 minutes. I think it was like one for like 4 or 5 minutes one time. And it would all happen in the middle of the night, because I kept telling my mom, and this went on for a month and a half. They wanted to disconnect me. I don't know how it is out in Washington, but after 3 days, if you don't have a permissions, a thing signed that prohibits them from disconnecting you, the state can disconnect you after 3 days. If you're in a coma, or if you're what they consider terminal, and there's no choice for them but other than to disconnect you. If life support is the only thing maintaining your life, they can disconnect you after 3 days, which I think is a bad rule. But because there's many people out there who don't have a surrogate, a family member, or a friend that can make that decision for them. But fortunately, I did. I had a surrogacy form signed with my mom in the event of that ever happening. So my mom was able to pull that out and use it as her trump card to keep them at bay. But the hospital kept telling her, night after night, he's not going to make it. She goes, well, that's what you told me last night. He made it through that night. So I'm going to say he's going to make it through this night. And, of course, I would have the setback. Like a few nights later, I would end up crashing. And then you see a team of doctors and nurses and everything running into my room and trying to do the reviving thing. And then suddenly I would come back. Well, the final time of my departure, so to speak, if you want to call it that, I had already been on the mends, had gotten my discharge orders, had already been going through physical therapy, which they told me, by the way, that I would never walk again because I had spent too much time in bed. My legs had what they call permanent atrophy to them, and said that if I ever did walk again, it would be with crutches or with a walker. And I said, no, I'm going to walk out of this hospital. And they said, well, they sent actually a psychologist into the room to try to get me to understand reality. And I told them real quick what reality was.
Yeah, I bet you did.
But in a very pleasant way. I was known as believe it or not, I was actually known as a super, very nice patient. I can't hardly believe that about myself, but it was true. The reason is because in those times of dying and coming back, each time I got to go see another part of heaven, I got to go a little further. And